Since ancient times, classical authors have both frightened and fascinated readers with stories about women warriors. The Amazons, the women said to have lived without men. They defeated heroes, shot arrows better than any Spartan, and in general embodied everything that the Greeks considered absolutely wrong for the patriarchal world of antiquity. The very idea that a woman could hold a sword was already something almost fantastical, and maybe everything would have remained just a fairy tale. But the more archaeologists dig in the Eurasian steppes, the more often they find women with arrows, swords, bronze axes, and quite real battle injuries. Hello, you're on the History Show channel, and welcome to the section Myths and Reality. Today we'll figure out where the myth of the Amazons came from, who the ancient Greeks might have actually seen, why the image of warrior women caused them cultural anxiety, and the main question, did the Amazons really exist? Amazons in the imagination of the ancient Greeks. If you open up ancient Greek myths, it seems like the Amazons lived somewhere at the edge of the world and existed specifically to throw respectable Greek men off balance. In Homer's Iliad, they are powerful women warriors who govern their own state without needing male guardians. For the audience of that time, it sounded about as shocking as news that Zeus would be replaced by Aphrodite on Olympus. Amazons. Why were the Greeks so obsessed with these women? First of all, their society was strictly patriarchal. War was a man's business, politics was a man's business, and inheritance was strictly through the male line. A woman involved in warfare was as much of a paradox to them as if Ares suddenly became a pacifist. In the Greek imagination, the Amazons became something like an anti-Greece, a world where women fought, rode horses, made decisions, and generally behaved the way men were supposed to according to Greek norms. And it was this inverted logic that made them such vivid heroes of myths, because a good myth is supposed to surprise. The Amazons handled this task perfectly. Greek artists and poets quickly picked up on the theme of the Amazons, depicting them as dangerous, skilled, and disciplined warriors who were capable of challenging the best heroes of Hellas. What's notable is that in almost every story, they still lost. An ancient genre, the woman warrior is strong, but remember who authored these myths. Nevertheless, for the Greeks, the Amazons were not just an exotic curiosity. It was an idea of another world, where familiar roles were reversed, and heroes faced not monsters, but women who, for some reason, didn't want to do housework, but preferred to mount a horse and go into battle. These monologues are surrogate, Amazon. If you ask a random fan of ancient history what they know about the Amazons, there's a good chance you'll hear the legend that these women supposedly cut off their right breast to make it easier to shoot a bow. The story is so vivid that over 2,500 years, it has gained more trust than many archaeological discoveries. The only problem is that this myth isn't supported by anything. Where did this misunderstanding begin? It started with the ancient Greeks attempting to explain a foreign word in their own way. The word Amazon wasn't Greek, it came from some Eastern, probably Iranian tradition. But like anyone, the Greeks loved folk etymology. They saw a familiar root and began creating meanings. Someone particularly creative noticed that the word sounded a bit like the combination of the Greek a, meaning without, and mazos, so if it sounds similar, it must really mean without a breast. And from there, the rest was just technique. If a meaning is found, then you need to come up with a plausible story. The authors claim the Amazons supposedly burned or removed their right breast early on to avoid interference with the bowstring. It all sounds dramatic, heroic, even a bit creepy. Exactly the kind of thing that sells well in myths. But there's a small problem with this version. It's physiologically meaningless. Anyone who has held a bow even once in their life understands that the chest doesn't get in the way of the archer, especially if they're shooting from the side where the chest isn't even located. Moreover, ancient artists, the very people who actually depicted Amazons, never portrayed them as one-breasted. Not a single image like that exists from all of antiquity. Modern linguists have also long abandoned this chest-related version. It's much more likely that the word Amazon has Iranian roots and means something like warrior woman, strong woman, or something along those lines. This fits perfectly with what we know about the real nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppes, among whom there really were women warriors. Amazons in mythology. After their first mentions by Homer, the Amazons quickly became full-fledged stars of the Greek mythological pantheon. Their appearance brought the perfect amount of drama to any story. One of the most famous myths was the story of Penthesilea, the queen of the Amazons, who came to help the Trojans. She fought bravely but was killed by Achilles. In fact, here, the ancient authors couldn't resist and added melodrama. Achilles' rage suddenly turned to pity, and some even hinted at sympathy. Another story is the feat of Heracles, who was tasked with obtaining the belt of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. Hippolyta, strangely enough, at first didn't mind simply giving him the belt, but Heracles arrived with such an impressive entourage that the Amazons could well have thought they weren't there for a gift, but to demonstrate their strength. Distrust soon led to a fight, and as in many Greek myths, it ended in bloodshed. In the end, it's yet another confirmation of a simple rule. When Greek heroes meet Amazons, the conversation usually doesn't last long. And we can't forget the Amazonomachy, scenes of battles between Greeks and Amazons. On the Parthenon friezes, women warriors battle alongside heroes. Although the outcome is always predictable, the Greeks won. Otherwise, why pay for construction? The Amazons' image remains striking. For Greeks, they symbolize civilization's triumph over barbarism. It's also interesting how their image evolved over time. In early depictions, the Amazons wear familiar Greek armor, helmets, breastplates, and shields. Later, artists started showing them in nomadic attire, ankle-length pants, embroidered jackets, tall pointed hats, bows, and axes. That is, the more the Greeks learned about the real steppe tribes, the more the Amazons began to resemble their women. Herodotus and his version. Herodotus. If there had been an award in Antiquity for the most vivid imagination among historians, Herodotus would have confidently made it to the finals. In this case, his imagination benefited science, as he was first to connect the Amazons to real peoples of the Eurasian steppes. According to his story, the Greeks once captured a group of Amazons and decided to send them home, of course by ship, because Greek logistics, even in myths, was never known for its originality. But the Amazons, once on board, killed the entire crew. However, for some reason, they didn't think about who would steer the ship, since they had no seafaring skills. So, the ship drifted at sea for a while until the wind carried them to the shores of Myotis, which is now the Sea of Azov. There they encountered the Scythians, with whom they developed a relationship. The women agreed to live with them only on the condition that they would not stay with the other Scythians, but would go farther away across the Tanais River, that is, the Don. There they founded a new people, whom Herodotus calls the Sauromatae, which is especially interesting. Herodotus notes that women in Sauromatae society actively hunted, bore arms, and fought alongside men as equals. And there was even a custom that a girl could not get married until she had killed at least one enemy. Yes, it sounds harsh, but the Greeks seem to have been impressed. And this is where the myth starts to wink a little, because archaeological findings in recent decades increasingly confirm that among the Scythians and Sarmatians, there really were women warriors. Not a female state, but a quite real cultural phenomenon that the Greeks could observe from the outside, and then, as usual, embellish it in their own style. How did the Scythians live? To understand why women in the steppe tribes often became warriors, you need to imagine the very way of life of these peoples. The Scythians were nomads who built no cities, erected no monumental temples, and left no philosophical treatises. Their home was the steppe, their wealth was in their herds, and their ability to survive where settled peoples would quickly realize that life is a fragile thing. Strict gender roles couldn't exist in a nomadic society under such conditions. Every member of the tribe had to know how to ride, hunt, defend themselves, and move quickly with the herds. A woman who couldn't shoot a bow or ride a horse wouldn't be a keeper of the hearth, but a burden, and the steppe didn't forgive such mistakes. That's why Scythian girls learned the same things as boys from an early age: horseback riding, archery, and handling weapons. Not for love or glory, but just to survive. But when skills become part of everyday life, they easily turn into combat training. And it's no surprise that in such communities, real female warriors would appear from time to time as a natural result of their way of life. Ancient sources, for example, tell about Tomyris, the queen of the Massagetae, a people related to the Scythians. She not only led her tribe, but also defeated the army of one of the most powerful rulers of that time, Cyrus, the great founder of the Persian Empire. After the victory, she had Cyrus's body found and his head dipped in a leather bag of blood, saying he could now have his fill. To say the least, the image of a woman who is afraid of unladylike work definitely doesn't fit here. Another example is Amaga, the Sarmatian ruler who lived later. According to Polyaenus, her husband was more interested in wine and entertainment than in the affairs of the tribe, and the responsibility quietly shifted to her. Amaga not only ruled the state, but also personally led a military operation to punish the Scythian king who was oppressing his neighbors. She gathered a dozen elite warriors, covered a huge distance in a single day, and with a sudden strike eliminated the tyrant, placing a more reasonable heir in his place. This is one of those times when leadership is so evident that even ancient authors wrote without condescension. All this shows that for the steppe tribes, women's participation in war was not part of a society structure where skills determined one's role, not gender. For the Greeks, whose society was strictly built on male patterns, such an approach seemed unbelievable. That's where the legends about a land of warrior women were born. Remove the myths, and warrior women on the steppe were not fantasy, but a logical result of the harsh conditions. Archaeology. What did scientists find in real burial mounds? For a long time, Amazons existed only on the pages of myths, but everything changed when archaeologists decided to literally dig deeper. In recent decades, many Scythian and Sarmatian burial mounds have been excavated in southern Siberia, Kazakhstan, the Don region, Crimea, and southern Ukraine. Many female skeletons have been discovered among the burials with arrows, spears, swords, and battle axes. This alone seriously challenges the idea that Amazons are a myth, but there's something even more interesting. Many of these women had combat injuries, broken ribs, sword cuts, and arrow marks on their bones. So this isn't decorative weaponry just for show, but real evidence of participation in combat. Bone analysis revealed that some women were riders, indicated by their anatomy. They show characteristic changes in the pelvic bones and legs caused by constant riding. And horseback riding is not just a skill, but the foundation of the combat culture of the steppe tribes. If a woman spent many years in the saddle, it means she took part in hunting, campaigns, and possibly military raids. Modern DNA studies have confirmed that among those buried with weapons, there were not mistakenly buried men, but women aged from 10 to 45 years old. New discoveries are made annually, and in some areas, female warriors make up 20–30% of female burials. This is now part of the culture, not just a coincidence or anomaly. This data has made scientists rethink their previous beliefs. Today, almost no serious researchers doubt that among the Scythians and Sarmatians there really were women warriors who fought, hunted, wore armor, and took part in battles. So, the myth of the Amazons is of course a myth, but it's based on a very real tradition. Was there an Amazon state? The Greeks, though imaginative, based their ideas on reality. Women on the steppes actually could shoot, ride, hunt, and fight. But everything concerning a state of women is pure mythology. Not a single trace of such a society has been found. No cities, no distinct culture, not even any unique evidence of a world completely ruled by women. For the Greeks, such a plot was a convenient literary tool, as it allowed them to depict a world turned upside down and to show everything that both frightened and fascinated them. The expansion of the myth from Antiquity to the Middle Ages and modern times. The myth of the Amazons turned out to be so vivid that Greece was not enough. The Romans, as usual, took Greek plots, seasoned them with their own rhetoric, and spread them throughout the Mediterranean. For them, the Amazons were a convenient symbol. Mysterious women from distant lands who fit perfectly into the Roman idea of barbarians. Strong, independent, but still doomed to lose to civilization. In Roman literature, the Amazons were almost a universal image of the woman warrior, a figure that could be inserted into any narrative where a dose of exoticism and drama was needed. With the spread of Greco-Roman culture, the Amazons made their way to Europe, where the Middle Ages embraced the legend with unexpected enthusiasm. In chivalric romances, they are less often enemies of heroes and more often exotic figures who disrupt the expected order, where men are warriors and women are usually those rescued. The Amazons were something of an intellectual provocation. They sparked interest, admiration, and that subtle sense of discomfort that arises when reality hints that things could be different. During the Renaissance, the Amazons' image was revived. Renewed interest in antiquity made them popular in painting, literature, and stage productions. They were now depicted not only as dangerous warriors, but also as noble heroines embodying the ideals of valor, honor, and independence. It can be said that it was the Renaissance that first placed the Amazons alongside the great female figures of culture, albeit through the lens of artistic idealism, but things became even more interesting after that. In the 16th century, the myth of the Amazons suddenly crossed the Atlantic and ended up in South America. When Francisco de Orellana's detachment was sailing down the vast unknown river, the travelers encountered a tribe where, according to the conquistadors' envoys, women actively participated in battle and shot bows just as well as men. This most likely happened in the midst of the usual battle chaos, where it was difficult to tell a long-haired man from a woman. But Orellana drew a conclusion that sounded incredibly convincing. We met Amazons, and the river received its new name, Amazon. And further away in Africa, in the kingdom of Dahomey, there was an elite female corps called the Agogie. When Europeans of the 18th and 19th centuries encountered them, they immediately called them the Dahomey Amazons. And although these women had nothing in common with the Scythians or Greek legends, the very comparison shows how enduring the ancient image turned out to be. So much so that any people where women took up arms were automatically perceived as descendants of the Amazons. So, are Amazons a myth or reality? When you put together myths, archaeological excavations, and accounts from ancient authors, it becomes clear that Amazons are not just a fiction, but also a non-literal reality. Yes, in antiquity there was no separate state of women warriors where men served only as decoration, but real women were at the foundation of this myth. Steppe tribes, Scythians, Sarmatians, Massagetae. There really were female warriors there who could shoot, wore armor, received battle wounds, and could command. Whether Amazons really existed isn't that complicated a question. They did exist, but not the ones who fought Achilles and Heracles, but those whom the Greeks encountered on the borders of their world and could only explain through myth. Maybe that's why the image of the Amazons still exists today. If you enjoyed this story and learned something new about the ancient world, then my time spent with you was not in vain. Write in the comments which other historical myths I should make a video about. See you in the next episodes. Goodbye, everyone.